The year is 1966. Brother Zach arrives in Freetown, Sierra Leone's capital. He is 21 and has obtained admission into Furabay College for a bachelor's in science. 5 years prior, Sierra Leone had obtained independence from British colonial occupation. Freetown, the capital city, is bustling with life, and Furabay College, one of West Africa's very first universities, is full of students from many parts of the continent. It is Brother Zach's very first time in the country and the very first time he leaves Cameroon, his homeland. He had believed in the Lord in 1956, some 10 years before. His time in Sierra Leone would mark a turning point in his life and ministry. In his quest to know and please God, he would come into encounters and experiences that would go a long way in shaping him spiritually, culminating in the colossal minister of the gospel he would become. Before leaving Cameroon, he had already been exposed to a positive spiritual environment which had eventually led him to believe. One of those who played a very crucial role in his life during his childhood years is his father, Solomon Fomum, a radical servant of the Lord. Brother Zach did not only come under the influence of his father's consecration, but was also a deep admirer and a loving and caring son to both parents. His attachment to his father was such that it was quite easy for him to eventually follow in Solomon's footsteps. Solomon Fomum was a pastor in the Presbyterian mission that served in northwestern Cameroon in the 1940s. His was a consecration of total separation from sin and all traditional beliefs to follow the one and only true God. He was widely known for his stand and uncompromising commitment to Jesus.
My father told us that when he finished from Bali and came to the village, so he was supposed to go and preach the gospel. His parents never wanted him to go. So one day he left and took his handbag with his Bible and his Bali song book inside, and he took a stick and was going to go. So the parents did not allow him to go because they knew that people kill people, they eat people. So the parents were refusing that he should not go, that they will kill him on the way. He told them that they should go. He's going for God. God will protect him. Unfortunately, when he was going, he raised one carry 4. They were there roasting a person that they have killed. So fear wanted to enter here. He told God that I'm going for your work. So protect me to pass in the midst of these people. So he said when he was passing, everybody was just giving him chance. He passed and went to Ngo and stayed in Ngo for 1 month. Then he came back and passed. And he said that when the people saw him, they were just giving him chance. He was just passing him. Nobody attacked him. And so when he went after, he thanked God. He was singing, thanking God. He even sang the song, only that I forgot it, because the song was in Bali. He was singing song, thanking God, going him alone. He was asking road to God because he had never been there. He went there and came back. When he came back, he was saying that he has to go and be a missionary. He told his parents that he wants to go for a missionary. So there was a government work that came for him to work, but he refused that government work. He said, I want to work for God. So they were loving him that you have gone and studied in Bali, come to work for God. God will pay you what? He said, no, he wants to work for God. So that government work had money, but the work he has to work with, they were paying him 5 shillings for mission work, but he decided to work for God. In the Presbyterian church, when you go for when you people want to take communion, they make you the confession. You have to confess to the pastor. So people were always confessing him. He saw that that place was immorality. There was too much immorality there. When a woman comes, he will ask, have you not seen a naked of somebody's husband? When a man comes, he says, have you not seen the nakedness of somebody's wife? So the people, they started hating him. They did not love him, but he said that he's preaching the true gospel. Whether you love me or don't love me, but I want to speak the true gospel. Until when he was transferred to Bambili, so the people carved a chair, even wrote his name there. Papa Solomon Fomum. I saw the chair, they carried the chair. They wrote a letter, but I never knew what was in the letter. They came and gave him the letter. He opened the letter, he read the letter, and he told them that, I thank you people for this chair, but I'm sorry that I will not take your chair. Because I have my chair in heaven that God has made. I prefer to take my chair in heaven than to take you people's chair. When he was talking like that, we like children were thinking that he was joking. Finally, he refused their chair, and they took their chair back.
It is within such an environment that the young ZTF grew. He was an obedient child with a very strong desire to serve and please his parents. He embraced wholeheartedly his father's loyalty to God and developed a character and personality that kept him consistently pursuing the pathway of excellence. Fura Bay College was a new beginning. Far from home, far from his father's presence, and free to do as he would, Brother Zach's desire to please God and to stay loyal to the Lord came under a test. Many years later, during one of his meetings with the members of the church in Yaoundé on the 8th of June 2000, he would speak about the unique spiritual experience he had during the first week of his stay at Fura Bay College. Quote, "During my first week at the university, on the 1st of October 1966, I was alone in my room. Though I realized that I had a divided heart, I had never committed immorality at the physical level, but my heart was immoral, rotten and impure. On that day, that 1st of October 1966, the Lord revealed my heart to me and showed me the extent of the pride that was inside. As a secondary school student, I had joined the Koumanist movement and was dreaming to become the Secretary General. On that day, the Lord showed me the extent to which my heart was rotten, a contrast to his heart, which was simple and pure. The Lord revealed to me his kind and humble heart, a contrast to mine which was full of pride. I sank under the weight of my sin, moved from the bed and fell to the floor where I wept. Later, I sat on the floor and begged the Lord that if he would give me a new heart, a pure heart, then I would serve him forever. After that prayer, it felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I rose to my feet, filled with a new zeal. It was with this repentant and softened new heart that Brother Zach began his first year at Fura Bay College. He parted ways with the Nkrumahist movement and turned his heart totally to serving God. For God had revealed to him an evil far worse than neo-colonialism. This evil was not only destroying the African continent, but the entire planet. God had opened his eyes to the evil of sin, which was the root cause of all human injustices and sufferings. On that day, the 1st of October 1966, the Lord set him on a new course, that of reaching the lost with the glorious message of the cross.
I never even heard about Fura Bay College until that time. It was chosen for me, but this is when the thing came. And we met Brother Zach there anyway. We became very close. We started being with the Koume, 3 with the Koume children there, amongst other Cameroonians also. But we set ourselves apart. We used to pray together. Even when we went to the Anglican service, we still looked for other church services which we thought would fulfill our needs. We even went to a place off Freetown, which is Madeira. There was a church that we used to attend. We go there and then you find the pastor will tell you, at the end of the service, he moves his cup. Hey, give my offering, put my offering. And he says, you do what I say, not what I do. And he takes up straight, he's in the next bar, drinking. After that. But that's what we had to go through. But the Christian Union, which was started there, was mostly by Brother Zach. He became the first leader of the Christian Union. And that's where we were worshiping. But before that, even when we left, he being a pastor's child here in the Presbyterian Church, and Sister Priska being a pastor's child, daughter, the Lord had started speaking to him, I believe. He was hungry to do something here.
Brother Zach had been in the same university as Sister Priska. But when I got, they had already graduated. And the Cameroonians spoke so much ill about him. This Fomum has let them down. He's here. He doesn't come to the meeting, to their Cameroon meetings. And when he comes, he's always talking about Jesus. And so I didn't know him. I didn't meet them there. But their testimony stayed. So when I got there, I was the only, no, there were 2 Cameroonian girls there. So they were very anxious that I don't believe. So they'll have a better testimony that Cameroonian girls are not like Sister Priska, because she also believed and she was quite radical. So, but you know, God is always victorious.
Brother Zach and his wife, Sister Priska, who at the time was his fiancée, faithfully interceded for Cameroon throughout their years at the university. Priska had joined him a year later, for she too had enrolled to study at Furabe College.
He was the president of the Christian Union. I was the prayer secretary of the Christian Union. And we continued, prayed a lot about Cameroon, because when we looked back, we knew that the gospel was not being preached in Cameroon. There were churches, but they had become religious. So, and we also decided that when we do get married, we will be teachers, so that we will have enough time, holiday time and other times, in order to preach the gospel.
Cameroon had also been recently liberated from colonial occupation of both France and Britain. Some missionary movements were serving in the nation, notably the Basel and Presbyterian. But very few Cameroonians were embracing a consequential spiritual career in line with the Lord's missionary vision. Evelyn Gohongyo, who at the time was already a born-again Christian, had been exposed to the impact of the spiritual revival that had swept across East Africa in the 1930s. She had felt the need and had effectively begun interceding for Cameroon. She was asking God to raise a young Cameroonian who would be sent to Uganda, which at the time was experiencing the revival, to catch the fire of revival and return to Cameroon to set the country ablaze for Jesus.
J'étais à une réunion, la conférence des églises de toute l'Afrique en Uganda. Et j'ai trouvé le pays très beau. Et les étudiants étaient engagés à proclamer l'évangile. Nos étudiants camerounais, quand ils allaient en Europe, ils devenaient incrédules. Et j'étais très impressionné de voir des étudiants qui étaient des pasteurs, des enseignants de la parole. Et j'ai fait là-bas en Uganda 3 mois. Je priais, Seigneur, envoie un Camerounais ici, à l'université de Makerere. Je suis sûr que si un Camerounais vient ici, il va rentrer avec quelque chose au Cameroun.
Brother Zach eventually completed his bachelor's in organic chemistry. He also received the May and Baker Prize of Excellence. God in his faithfulness ensured that the prayers of Evelyn be answered. In 1969, Brother Zach left Sierra Leone for East Africa to continue his studies at the University of Makerere in Kampala, Uganda's capital.
And I stayed in Sierra Leone to finish up because I was a year behind him in studies. But he was such a wonderful student. He had the best grades that the university had ever known when he had his first degree. And because he had that, he was now able, he was given the permission to do a doctorate straight without having to do a master's. And his supervisor was moving to Uganda. His lecturer was moving to Uganda, and he wanted this lecturer to be his supervisor. So he asked him if he could follow him. He said, yes, if you want me to supervise you, follow me to Uganda. So that's how he left and went to Uganda. And I stayed in Sierra Leone.
The hand of God would be upon Brother Zach and would guide him during his years in Uganda. He met Dr. Joe Church, the founding father of the East African Revival. Dr. Church was a missionary doctor, a pioneer of the Rwanda Mission, a brand of the Church Mission Society, which was evangelizing the Rwanda-Burundi territories under Belgian colonial occupation at the time. The revival is said to have started on a hill called Gahini in 1929 and was spread to the eastern mountains of Congo, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi. It was characterized by a new passion for Jesus and a quest for holiness. This movement is said to have been the work of the Holy Spirit. There was widespread public confession of sins, as many wholeheartedly sought to be reconciled to God. Dr. Church was instrumental in getting European and African church leaders from different ethnic groups together to plan the spread of the revival. This would unite Christians along East Africa, resulting in a spiritual climate that saw the emergence of many consecrated servants of God. The revival also became known as the Balokole Revival. Balokole in Luganda means the saved people. Such was the spiritual climate of East Africa at the time Brother Zach got there. Uganda as a nation had also gone through several waves of political instability, leading to a military coup in 1971, which saw General Idi Amin rise to power. Amin would unleash an 8-year reign of terror, which would lead to the deaths of some 500,000 Ugandans. Such was the political climate of the country while Brother Zach was studying for his PhD. However, this couldn't distract him from pursuing his spiritual and academic development. He would begin quite humbly, serving the younger brethren he met in the Christian student movement. Speaking about his early days in Uganda, he says, "When I got to Uganda, I had already been 12 years in the Lord, and I had led the Christian student movement in Sierra Leone for 2 years. When I got to Uganda, I joined the Christian community there. I was entrusted the responsibility of making sure that all the benches were properly arranged before the meetings. I would arrive at the church quite early to arrange the benches, and after the meeting, I would make sure the place is in order by rearranging the benches once again. I was a PhD student. The others were still in secondary school. They were permitted to preach, but I was not. But since I got to the church quite early, I began to minister to those who arrived earlier and to those who stayed after the meetings. Not long after, I already had a small team. There is always room for a servant." He pursued his PhD studies with this same heart of a servant, working under the supervision of Professor Landor. He served the old professor with unparalleled loyalty and deep respect, never failing to show up at the laboratory on time and ahead of his supervisor. He would put in an average of 18 hours of hard work each day mostly carrying out research alone in the laboratory. He would build a relationship with Professor Lando that would go a long way into his professional career, opening doors for research and scientific publications in international journals. In speaking of his relationship with Professor Lando, he says, Professor Lando was supervising some 45 PhD students. He decided to divide his library in two. One part was given to the university, the second part was given to me. Why did he choose me amongst the 45 students? I wasn't the most intelligent. I was the most loyal. I say this to the world. 20 years from now, what will matter most wouldn't be the things you would have done, but the kind of heart you would have had. Brother Zach was developing his spiritual life, witnessing very faithfully within the campus and in some neighborhoods in Kampala, his commitment to satisfy God's heart, unwavering and growing steadily. But then he soon realized that very few were turning to Christ. In spite of his sincere commitment to win the lost, each month he and his evangelism partner would see just about 2 persons saved. Brother Zach quickly realized that he lacked that which would bring men to their knees before Christ. 4 years had passed since he had consecrated himself to the Lord. He had witnessed faithfully, but only 4 persons had been saved. There was this very deep insatisfaction in his heart which drove him to his knees before God. A year had passed since his arrival at Kampala. It was the month of October, precisely the 24th day. Some 6 days earlier, he had begun a partial fast to humble himself and express his state of helplessness before God. On the 24th of October 1970, in a hostel in the University of Makerere, the Lord baptized him with the Holy Spirit and filled him with power. Recalling this first experience 34 years later, during a Tuesday teaching meeting in Yaoundé on the 2nd of November 2004, he described the changes he began to notice in his service for God.
I was driven to seek the power of God.
J'étais conduit, poussé à chercher la puissance de Dieu.
Because of a profound sense of personal inadequacy.
À cause d'un sens profond d'inadéquation.
I was invited to do that which I was unqualified for.
J'étais invité à faire cela pour lequel je n'étais pas qualifié.
And nothing could qualify me.
Et rien ne pouvait me qualifier.
So for 6 days I was preparing.
Mais pendant 6 jours, je me préparais.
On the evening of the 6th day,
Et le soir du 6e jour,
the heavens were open.
les cieux étaient ouverts.
I was alone. I was alone.
J'étais seul.
I was on my knees.
J'étais à genoux.
It was 5 p.m.
C'était 17 heures.
The power from above came upon me.
La puissance d'en haut était venue sur moi.
I want to forget the immediate signs.
Je voudrais laisser de côté les signes immédiats.
The first thing that happened
Mais la première chose qui s'était produite,
was an unusual power to win the lost.
c'était une puissance singulière de gagner les perdus.
I preached the same message
Je prêchais le même message,
as I preached before with very little results.
les mêmes que j'avais prêché avant sans aucun résultat.
But after the power of God came upon me,
Mais après que la puissance de Dieu était venue sur moi,
the same message went out
le même message sortait
and produced some parallel results.
et produisait des résultats sans pareil.
As an active witness at the university,
En tant que témoin actif à l'université,
I used to see one student believe in 2 or 3 months.
je voyais un étudiant croire en 2 ou 3 mois.
But that Saturday that the Holy Spirit came upon me,
Mais ce samedi-là, quand le Saint-Esprit était venu sur moi,
in my normal evangelism the next week,
dans mon évaluation normale de la semaine d'après,
4 university students believed.
4 étudiants de l'université avec eux.
And I began to see university students believe.
J'ai commencé à voir les étudiants de l'université croire.
Wherever I went, people believed.
Partout où j'allais, les gens croyaient.
I went to the same place where I used to preach. And when I said stand up, people were moving their chairs to mock
J'étais allé
me.
au même endroit où j'avais prêché. Et quand je disais que ceux qui voulaient croire qu'ils se lèvent, les gens ils remuaient les chaises comme ça et ils restaient sur place.
The first Tuesday I went after the power of God
Le
came upon
premier
me.
mardi où je m'y suis rendu après que le Saint-Esprit était descendu sur la
I
puissance.
preached the same message.
J'avais prêché le même message.
I gave the same invitation.
J'avais lancé la même invitation.
Then 60 or 70 young men stood up.
Puis 60 ou 70 jeunes gens,
All boys.
tous des garçons.
And began to rush ahead.
Et ils ont commencé à venir.
I thought they were coming to beat me.
Ils pensaient qu'ils voulaient venir m'agresser.
I said, yeah, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Attendez, qu'est-ce que vous faites?
They said, but you have said those who want to receive the Lord to come forward.
Et ils m'ont dit, mais tu as dit que ceux qui veulent recevoir le Seigneur Jésus qui viennent devant.
Then I knew something that I did not even understand had happened.
Alors j'ai su que quelque chose que je ne comprenais même pas s'était produit.
Because I had preached just as I had preached before.
Parce que j'avais prêché juste comme je prêchais avant.
It was Tuesday.
C'était mardi.
I didn't tie it to what happened on Saturday.
Je n'avais pas relié ce phénomène à ce qui s'était produit samedi.
Until this day.
Et jusqu'à ce jour.
Then I went to the streets of Kampala.
Puis je suis descendu dans les rues de Kampala.
3 or 4 evenings.
3 ou 4 soirées.
From 7 p.m. to 11 p.m.
De 19h à 23h.
And I began to witness.
Et j'ai commencé à témoigner.
In 2 years.
En 2 ans.
About 500 people were led to the Lord on the streets of Kampala.
Et environ 500 personnes étaient conduites au Seigneur dans les rues de Kampala.
I began to run after sinners.
J'ai commencé à courir après les pécheurs.
I remember the young man.
Je me rappelle un jeune homme.
I told him I wanted to tell him about Jesus.
Je lui avais dit que je voulais lui parler de Jésus.
He asked me, are you saved?
Il m'a demandé, est-ce que tu es sauvé?
I said, yes, I'm very saved.
Je lui ai dit, je suis très sauvé.
He told me, I don't listen to saved people.
Et il m'a dit, je n'écoute pas les sauvés. Parce que c'est comme ça qu'ils appellent.
I said, you will listen to this one.
J'ai dit, si tu entendras, tu écouteras ce
He began to run away.
Non, il a commencé à fuir.
I began to run after him.
Moi, j'ai commencé à
I
courir
began to run
après
after him. So he was going.
Et il allait.
He was going towards the road to Gaza.
Et il allait vers la route de Gaïza.
I was running after him.
Et je courais après lui.
I was jogging.
Et je courais.
Then when he was tired,
Puis quand il était fatigué,
he began to walk.
Il a commencé à marcher.
And I began to preach.
J'ai commencé
And I began to preach. 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 I preached. I preached on the love of God. I preached on the love of God. I preached on the judgment of God. I preached on sin. I preached. I preached. Then he stopped.
Après, il s'est arrêté.
He told me, tell me some more.
Il dit, bon, dis-moi bien, maintenant.
I gave him a piece of paper.
Je lui ai donné un bout de papier.
He had my name and my room number.
Avec mon nom et le numéro de ma
And
chambre.
I ran away.
Et je suis reparti
And
en
I
fuite.
ran back to the university.
Et je suis rentré à l'université.
The next day,
Le jour d'après,
he spent 2 hours
il passa 2 heures
to find my room.
pour trouver ma chambre.
And then my room,
Et là, dans ma chambre,
I led him
je l'ai conduit
into the precious hands of Master.
dans les précieusement du maître.
Then I wrote my first tracts.
Et puis j'ai écrit mon premier traité.
And I wrote my first follow-up letter.
J'ai
First follow-up
écrit ma
letter.
première lettre de suivi.
And I began to go all over Uganda.
Et j'ai commencé à aller partout en Uganda.
I had become another man.
J'étais devenu un autre homme.
In later years, he would call this first experience Pentecost One. This is because he would have a number of other such experiences each time the Lord called him into new levels of service and spiritual leadership. But the years that followed this first experience saw many dramatic changes in his spiritual life. His prayer life blossomed and he began to pray 8 hours uninterrupted.
Particulièrement quand le Saint-Esprit est descendu sur lui, c'est là où il a reçu le ministère d'intercession. Comme il a dit, il y avait des moments, en 1970, après que le Saint-Esprit soit descendu sur lui, il passait 8 heures en prière d'affilée. Et sans se fatiguer, il ne se rendait même pas compte. Il a raconté une instance où il priait. Il a prié pendant des heures. Son camarade, un de ses amis est venu s'agenouiller avec lui. Son ami a prié 2 heures de temps et il s'est en allé et il ne s'est même pas rendu compte tellement il était emporté dans la prière.
He was joined by his fiancée Priska in 1972, and on the 26th of February that same year, they were married. Their first child, Ruth, was also born that same year, the month of December. After obtaining his PhD in 1973, he lectured for some time at Makerere University. In 1973, he was one of the 2 speakers of the Ugandan Kesik Convention. The Keswick movement, which is also known as the Holiness or Higher Life movement, traces its origins to as far back as 1835 and has its roots in the Wesleyan Holiness movement. The movement promotes the life lived in the fullness and the power of the Holy Spirit. The Keswick conventions held in different parts of the world have had speakers such as D.L. Moody, Hudson Taylor, and Billy Graham. This 1973 East African edition was a major spiritual event. Brother Zach withdrew once again to confront his inadequacies and plead with God to fill him afresh. The Lord answered his prayer and granted him to minister in the power of the Holy Spirit.
Since 1970,
Depuis 1970,
I've never been the same.
je n'ai jamais été le même.
At 28,
À 28 ans,
I was speaking at the highest meeting in Uganda. I spoke,
j'avais été orateur dans la réunion la plus élevée en Ouganda,
the Uganda Keswick Convention.
la convention ougandaise de Keswick.
Before that meeting, I fasted for 3 days.
Avant cette réunion-là, j'avais jeûné pendant 3 jours.
Where I was staying, my neighbor was a senior lecturer in physics.
Là où nous habitions, mon voisin était un chargé de cours en physique.
He was at the meeting.
Il était à la réunion.
Mr. Professor Koume, I took the first lesson. I took the first message.
J'avais pris le premier message.
Mr. Professor Koume, he was the leading speaker of Uganda for 20 years.
Et l'évêque Festo Kivengere, qui était le dirigeant de l'Ouganda pendant 20 ans et de l'Afrique de l'Est pendant 20 ans,
He took the next message.
avait pris le message suivant.
When I came home,
Quand j'étais rentré à la maison,
Dr. Bletty, my neighbor, came and
le
said,
docteur Blettier, mon voisin, était venu et il avait dit,
you may not know it,
tu pourrais ne pas le savoir,
but as we were speaking, the Holy Spirit was flowing and filling the room.
mais pendant que tu parlais, le Saint-Esprit coulait et remplissait la salle.
Some weekends,
Certains week-ends,
at 5 p.m.,
à 17 h,
I'll be 300 kilometers from Kampala.
j'étais à 300 km de Kampala.
I had a car.
J'avais une voiture.
I'll be driving home.
J'étais en train de conduire pour rentrer à la maison.
I've been preached there for the whole weekend.
Ayant prêché là-bas pendant tout le week-end.
The Holy Spirit was
Le Saint-Esprit était sur moi.
Brother Zach and his young family would return to Cameroon in 1975. On the 3rd of May that year, Archbishop Festo Kivengere, who is also a product of the East African Spiritual Revival, prayed for Brother Zach, commissioning him to take the gospel to all in Cameroon. Laying hands on the younger spiritual leader, the Archbishop proclaimed, "Lord, grant that when Brother Zach goes to Cameroon, let every Cameroonian say to him, 'You owe me Jesus.'" It was with these blessings and prophetic words that Brother Zach left Uganda, the land where he had been so enormously enriched by the love of the Lord and the saints, and where he had developed an intimate fellowship with the Lord and the person of the Holy Spirit. These early experiences with the power of the Holy Spirit helped him to build a rich prayer life and an extremely fruitful service, which would eventually give birth to the missionary movement known today as Christian Missionary Fellowship International. His example is proof that the normal Christian life can only be lived in the fullness and the power of the Holy Spirit.
the Spirit-filled man,
L'homme rempli de l'Esprit,
even at his weakest,
même dans sa plus profonde faiblesse,
is absolutely different from the man who is not filled with the Spirit.
est absolument différent de l'homme qui n'est pas rempli du Saint-Esprit.
There's a difference in depth.
Il y a une différence dans la profondeur, dans la largeur, dans le contenu.
I want to beg you.
Je voudrais te supplier.
Oh, whatever will cost, whatever will cost.
Quel que soit ce que ça va coûter, quel que soit ce que ça va coûter.
Be filled with the Spirit.
Sois rempli du Saint-Esprit.